Thank you for joining us this week on Up in the Air. I'm Hunter Williams.
And I'm Nathan Flinchbaugh.
We hope you guys all had a nice, relaxing spring break. I know I did. Nathan, how was your break?
Oh, it was great. It was fantastic. I relaxed a lot, but you know what? I missed you, Hunter, and I'm happy to be back on the set of Up in the Air.
Well, I missed you too, Nathan. But we're back now. We have a jam-packed episode this week. We have a lot of exciting stuff, new features from the WeatherCom class, and some very unique stories.
Yeah, we have a story coming up about the Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington, D.C., and Casey will also be by later with your climate outlook.
That's right. We'll have all that and more in just a bit. But for now, here's Update in the Air.
The global temperature in February smashed monthly records to become the warmest month in more than a century of record keeping. According to NASA data, global surface temperatures across the land and ocean in February were 1.35 degrees Celsius warmer than the average temperature for that month measured from the 1951 to 1980 baseline. The previous record was set in January, which was 1.14 degrees Celsius warmer than baseline average for that month. However, February did not break the record for the hottest month, which is likely to only happen during the summer in the northern hemisphere. El Niño is considered to have contributed to the current record run of global temperatures. The weather event increases the area of warm surface water across the Pacific, allowing global oceans to transfer heat more readily into the atmosphere.
Hurricane intensity forecasts have been playing a game of catch-up for years. Despite large strides in hurricane track forecasts, predicting the intensity of approaching storms has proven to be more difficult. However, a new study out of Rutgers University hopes to alleviate this problem. In this new study, researchers identified a dynamic process that cools the coastal ocean and can weaken approaching hurricanes. The study specifically targeted summer landfalls when the ocean is most stratified, meaning the ocean is divided between a warm surface layer and a cold bottom layer. The study specifically highlighted Hurricane Irene as an example of the dynamic cooling process. According to team members, Irene's winds mixed the coastal ocean's warm surface layer and cold bottom layer, causing rapid cooling ahead of Irene's eye, which in turn weakened the storm. The study members are confident that with a better understanding of the dynamic cooling process, hurricane intensity forecasts will be able to improve in the near future.
The storm brought strong winds, heavy rain, snow, and high surf to California on Sunday, the fourth day of wet weather that has inundated rivers and roads and led to some evacuations. California is in its fifth year of drought, and though the rain and snow help, it will take years of normal or above normal rainfall to right the deficit, experts say. The storm that dumped rain in much of northern California weakened as it moved south through the southern part of the state, where they saw scattered showers or drizzle, and beachgoers were warned of powerful surf along the central and southern California coast. North in Washington state, a man died after a large tree fell on his car in Seattle as a strong windstorm battered much of the western part of that state. Meanwhile, Northern California saw rivers and creeks swell and flood risk rise. More than 7 inches of rain fell during a 72-hour period in Pasacandero Creek in San Mateo County, according to the National Weather Service. Downtown San Francisco received 3 inches of rain during that same period.
A new NASA study finds that the recent drought, which began in 1998 in the eastern Mediterranean Levant region, is likely the worst drought of the past 9 centuries. Past droughts in the Levant region, which is made up of Cyprus, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, as well as Turkey, were analyzed using data from tree rings. Based on the tree rings, NASA scientists could determine dry years where there were thin tree rings and years where water was plentiful based on thicker tree rings. The team also found that between the years 1100 and 2012, tree ring records corresponded to droughts described in historical documents written at the time. In addition, the team determined that when the northern part of the Mediterranean tended to be dry, the eastern North African areas were wet. This relationship helped the team understand what ocean and atmospheric conditions lead to dry or wet periods in the area. The 900-year drought records across the Mediterranean that were produced by the team will be used to refine computer models that project drought risk for the coming century.
The year-long wait to see the beautiful cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. just got shorter. The forecast for peak cherry blossom blooms has been moved up. The 2016 cherry blossom peak bloom dates are now March 18th until March 23rd. That's nearly 2 weeks ahead of what had been predicted just a week ago, and almost a month ahead of the peak in 2015, which was April 10th. It's an unusually early start, but not unprecedented. The earliest peak bloom on record is March 15, 1990. The annual National Cherry Blossom Festival takes place this year from March 20th to April 17th. The festival includes 3 weeks and 4 weekends of events featuring a diverse and creative programming promoting traditional and contemporary arts and culture, natural beauty, and community spirit.
Have you ever heard the saying, a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could lead to a tornado in Texas? Well, a University of Washington study set out to see if this well-known saying actually holds any truth. More specifically, members of the study wanted to determine whether unobserved minuscule disturbances can actually affect a weather forecast. Fortunately, the answer to this question is largely no, and according to the study, the focus should instead be on the bigger picture. The study found that the uncertainty produced in a forecast by ignoring circulations up to 1 mile wide is less than that produced by a very small percentage error in observations on the larger scale. The study also concluded that it is more important to improve observations of the atmosphere on horizontal scales between 100 and 300 miles than to create a denser network of observing stations that measure the atmosphere. We'll be back in a moment with more.
Welcome back to the show. We now have a feature on the winter storm of 1993.
Fun fact, I'm actually from Birmingham, Alabama, and where I lived, this storm dropped about a foot of snow, and that's a lot of snow for people in Alabama.
Yeah, and another fun fact, though, Hunter wasn't alive.
That is also true.
Enjoy.
Before there was any snowmageddon or snowpocalypse, you had the superstorm of 1993. Perhaps one of the most memorable storms of the 20th century, this mid-March monster packed a wallop of a punch, dropping feet of snow as far south as Birmingham, Alabama. Places like even sunny Florida, much to the surprise of its Disney tourists and retirees, saw several inches of the white stuff fall. What was also of surprise to many, however, was just how late in the calendar the snow fell, with the storm taking place in the middle of March. Late-season snowstorms like this are uncommon but not rare, says Paul Cosin, a winter weather expert for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. In fact, in 2008 alone, we saw over $850 million in property damage due to late-season snowfall. Now, Mr. Cosin adds that even while snow falls in March, it is likely to not accumulate as much as it would in January. He says that at this point the sun is at a higher angle in the sky, and the length of the day is longer, allowing for a warmer ground. Now, closer to home, State College averages around 10 inches of snow in the month. However, extremes have happened. Back in 1942, we saw an almost staggering 50 inches in the month blanket the town. Last year in 2015, just under 8 inches was recorded for March, but one storm dropped 3 inches on the first full day of spring alone. So regardless of whatever your Uncle Bob has to say, or even any groundhog for that matter, you never really know what Old Man Winter may have in store. For Up in the Air, I'm Dominic Ramuni.
The ocean possesses immense power that cannot be underestimated. But as the ocean ebbs and flows with the vigorous tide, its great power becomes stronger as waves rush into the shoreline. But what is causing these higher tidal flow? Researchers have seen trends of excessive sea levels rising dating back to the 1900s. Over the century, sea levels have consistently been rising. According to NEAF.org, since 1880, global sea levels have risen about 8 inches, and scientists even expect global sea levels to rise another 1 to 4 feet by the year 2100. This is all rooted in climate becoming warmer across the globe over the past couple of years. Warming climate causes melting of land-based ice, which includes glaciers and polar ice caps, which ultimately increases the flow of water into the oceans. As oceans roughly absorb 1,000 times the amount of heat that the atmosphere does, the volume of the ocean expands, which rises sea levels. Sea level rises negatively affect the coastal areas of the United States. Risks include urban flooding, sewer overflows, deteriorating coastal habitats, water quality, and water contamination. When paired with severe storms, coastal regions can also even receive dramatic storm surges and damages to structures, roads, airports, and even bridges. And An example of this is Hurricane Sandy, which hit off the coast of New York, where most of the intense flooding and deterioration to the infrastructures and the communities were reported. It is hard to say what the future holds for the ocean's power and strength, and how these coastal areas will fight against these changes. Sea level rises are a prominent feature to the ocean and can destroy the nature of the United States. For Up in the Air, I'm Allie DeVicki.
Thanks for tuning back into Up in the Air. It's that time of the show. We have Casey standing by at the climate wall.
That's right, Casey, we haven't talked to you yet. How was your spring break?
It was awesome, guys. I went to Deep Creek, Maryland, where right now they don't have any snow on the ground, but still much of the West has lots of snow cover. 8.1% of the U.S. is covered in snow right now, and even portions of Maine still has snow on the ground. It hasn't all gone away yet, but we'll look at more into that later on. Right now, looking at this week's coming up pattern for the upper air, warmer temperatures could be moving a little bit northward, but these colder temperatures staying to the north up in Canada, and we'll be getting a little bit of a warm-up as we look into next week. For March 22nd to the 28th, much of the United States will be above normal. Even parts of Maine, Vermont, will be about normal for this time of year, but the rest of the eastern portion of the United States above normal from what they're used to seeing this time of year. And as we push west, well above normal for parts of Arizona and Colorado, and even parts of Southern California as well. And looking at our precipitation outlook, parts of the eastern seaboard much below normal precipitation, but the rest of the eastern part of the United States, from the Mississippi River Valley down into the Delta region, experiencing above normal precipitation. And as we push west, this story continues. Below normal precipitation for the Four Corner region and even parts of Southern California as well. Below normal precipitation, but up here along the Canadian border, above normal precipitation for much of that region as well. And looking at our drought monitor, a couple spots here in Louisiana and Texas as well, but pushing west, I mean, the main story is still that drought continuing, and it doesn't look like there's any end in sight. But that's all I have here at the Climate Wall. Back to Nathan and Hunter at the desk.
Thank you for that, Casey. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this week's episode, but of course we'll be back next week with a brand new episode.
But for now, I'm Nathan Flinchball.
And I'm Hunter Williams. We'll see you next time, Up in the Air.